The two procurement nerds are back, Dr. Eloise, and we've got quite a different format for the podcast. Normally we are Zoom split screen.
Yep.
And today is Thursday, May 14th, and we are actually recording live from a Connect House procurement event in San Francisco.
Live from San Francisco.
So, Dr. Eloise, we have done a couple data center episodes in the past. Two of our top performing shows, actually, there's just been crazy explosion of all things data center in the media. Really, no matter what industry you're in, I think it's something that's really top of mind. So we've prepared 3 topics that we want to walk through today that we think are particularly interesting for folks that are in procurement or procure tech.
Yep.
So let's start off with some finance related things. So first part of our show today is going to be talking about the AI economics reckoning and all the craziness that is happening around pricing and cost management as it relates to data centers, which is fueling all the craziness that's happening in the AI space.
And the reckoning that tokens might be more expensive than humans.
Yeah. So there is a tech writer, and I would call him a media critic. His name is Ed Zitron, and he authored Where's Your Ed At? And hosts the Better Offline podcast. If anyone in the audience has not checked him out, he's got some really interesting and controversial things to say about AI in the data center space. And he recently did, a 40-minute or so interview. And so we've pulled some of the points that he talked about here because we think they're pretty relevant. And some of the things we agree with and some we do not. So let's start off with talking around this whole thing around subsidized pricing and people moving towards token-based pricing and what this means particularly to folks in procurement.
Well, one of the knocks against mobility, I'm already going off topic here, but when you look at Uber and Lyft and a lot of the mobility solutions, and a lot of criticism has been because they're not profitable and they're subsidized by venture capital. And so that it's a long-term bet of 10, 15, 20 years. And the same thing has happened in AI, especially with the frontier models or the frontier companies. And so there's a real reckoning right now. And it's led by Microsoft sort of like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be giving away so much of our profit. So that has sort of like, and once one does it, then everybody starts following suit.
So how many in the audience either pay for ChatGPT or Anthropic?
Okay, everybody in the audience.
Almost 100% of folks raise their hands.
Now let me, raise your hand if you pay for more than one. Oh, wow, almost everybody on that one. 3? Anybody do 3? Okay, about half.
Half
so, yeah.
are 3 or more.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's really kind of causing, I don't know if we're going to call it a backlash yet, but is how these AI companies are pricing. So Anthropic right now, at least for the plan that I'm on, for our business plan, it's about $200 a month.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm probably consuming at, let's say, $2,000 to $4,000 a month in actual tokens, and you multiply that out by millions of users, the math ain't mathin', right? So we're charging folks for a subsidized pricing model that is not going to be sustainable long term.
Yeah.
And if you guys check out the interview that Ed did, he said something that I thought was really interesting. He said, when you eat the buffet every day, you don't know how much the meal costs. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of really relevant to the data center space, is that we don't really know what the cost is. And we have AI companies that are just kind of throwing things over the fence and trying to price the best that they can. So a lot of problems there, especially for procurement folks who are trying to negotiate contracts and do some sort of prediction and modeling and trying to go to the CFO and give some reasonable estimates, which just get thrown out the window.
And we've seen this movie before in that this is how cloud computing was 15 years ago. It was like unlimited, and it was also subsidized largely by Microsoft and definitely by Amazon. Here, give us your credit card and consume all you want. And then all of a sudden you had these bills that went through the roof because everybody was going hog wild at the buffet.
So how many folks know about the big announcement that GitHub just recently made? So
I didn't either.
So GitHub is owned by Microsoft. They are the Microsoft Copilot, and they have made a formal public announcement that starting in June, so less than 3 weeks, they are moving to a token-based billing model. They are the first big player in the space to actually publicly come out, take a stance and say, we are losing insane amounts of money. This is not sustainable, and we are now coming out and changing our model. So this is a really big deal for all of us who are in procurement and who are negotiating contracts and doing buying, knowing that we have a major player that is coming out and kind of starting this pivot in pricing.
It breaks my heart that Microsoft is losing so much money. We might set up a GoFundMe for them.
So one of the reasons why, other than for us as consumers, why this is so challenging, right? And businesses are having a hard time with estimates and predictions is it's really, really hard for AI companies, which is a lot of this is driven through data center, to actually know what their costs are. So there's a real problem with figuring out what is the actual cost. And one of the reasons for this is LLMs are very unpredictable. So we don't know when somebody goes in and puts in a query how long it's going to take and how much effort it's going to take to return that. Is it going to be one shot, or is it going to be spinning the wheels? Is it going to go out and mass delete everything? So there's this whole behind the scenes right now, which is kind of the Wild West in figuring out what does that model actually look like. And another example that was made very public, I don't know if any of you guys saw, the Uber CTO said they blew through their entire AI token budget in just a few months. So they had budgeted for an entire year, blew through it in just a few months. Budget gone.
Which makes the people that are posting their little awards of using so many tokens per day or month look silly. Because why are you celebrating that? You're just caught, anyway.
Yeah. So another thing that's kind of interesting along this lines is Goldman Sachs has reported that some businesses spending 10% of headcount costs on AI tokens, that's projected to raise to 100% of cost of headcount. So the tool that was supposed to replace people is now costing as much or more than the people if we're really going to lean into and see this major change in usage token-based pricing versus subscription pricing.
And so, and as we'll get further into this, as we look at what the cost structure is and what drives these unpredictable costs is energy consumption, and electricity certainly is a constrained market. The cost of building all this infrastructure, and the fact that a data center built today has barely a 3-year shelf life. And so the cost to operate the data centers is what's really driving this cost. So as procurement people, deconstructing the should cost of that is interesting.
And not to even mention political backlash. And we've had some cities and communities just completely outraged around not wanting data centers, which they're running campaigns in some states and some local governments. It's actually been blocked. When you want to talk about the cost of all of that to fight local governments and get things approved is a pretty major effort on its own.
And I think the data center in my community battle is a proxy for people pushing back on certainly on the AI push and the fact that it's probably going to take a lot of jobs. It's also, as you said, a political backlash of the tech oligarchs of who are just consuming or making lots of money off of our data. And the data centers are a physical manifestation that people can push back against. And without understanding all the AI stuff, it's like you're going to build a big data center behind the Walmart. Like, no, we don't want that. So it's something that it's very practical.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of craziness happening there as well, and a lot of financial implications that will impact all of us depending on how that goes. So anything, Dr. Eloise, that we want to dive into for the Stargate project?
Well, this is, again, so we have the jilted lover of Microsoft because OpenAI brought relevance to Microsoft early on when ChatGPT got popular. But Microsoft has clearly embarrassed itself by trying to corporatize AI, and part of that deal with OpenAI was that they would provide infrastructure and it was $100 million on some ridiculous amount. And now OpenAI is kind of is going to Oracle, and so now the really interesting thing is that there's a lot of criticism of the OpenAI and their funding and their ability to actually turn a profit, which could drag Oracle down, which I think we'd all agree would be a great thing. And so
do we have any Oracle employees in the room?
I don't think so. We know we don't have any SAP employees because I'm sure I can diss SAP at some point.
That's Dr. Eloise's specialty.
Yeah, exactly. But certainly the data center consumption of that could be a big problem, or lack thereof, for Oracle.
So Open's own AI projections got leaked, and it was said that they need $852 billion in revenue for the Stargate project. So we're talking about a massive, massive funding gap.
I wonder how many users at $20 a month that is. Maybe there's somebody good at math can figure that out.
So this goes back to the dependency chain. If OpenAI can't pay Oracle something like $75 billion a year, Oracle can't service its debt, right? And then what happens? What happens to Oracle after that?
I don't know, because their stock is the collateral on this whole thing. So we can only hope. That was a thinker, yeah.
So Dr. Eloise, anything else from a token-based
No, I think
pricing pivot?
I think we've beat that to the ground. So now the question is what do we do about it? How do we think about this? And let's deconstruct what's going on with data centers and what are our alternatives.
Yeah. So there's been a couple interesting companies that have emerged over the last few months. One of them is around putting data centers in space. And the other is running data center type power through people's individual homes so that we don't even need the big scary looking data centers that we're all used to.
Okay. So what's the name of this company that's putting data centers in space?
So this actually just came out in the last couple of weeks on Crunchbase, so the timing was perfect for our episode. It's called Cowboy Space. So if none of you guys have looked up this company, I highly recommend doing it. They just raised $275 million in a Series B, and they have a $2 billion valuation as of May 11th. And one of their founders is also the co-founder of Robinhood, so a very controversial company. And here is their pitch, and I'm curious to see how crazy we think this is. New data centers face a 5 to 7 year grid connection waits in major US markets. So they're saying that we're not going to really have what we need for 7 years. Solar energy in orbit is abundant and continuous. There's no night, no weather. If you can't get power on Earth fast enough, go where the power is, which in space.
We have too much junk in low orbit space as it is. We can track 40,000 pieces of junk, and that number is growing. And and there's more and more satellites going up there, and I'm not really good at spatial reasoning, but I have to think that that is not a great strategy, to say nothing of the fact that at some point we're going to be shooting missiles into space, blowing up satellites. So I'm really
you're questioning.
I have some questions. I want to talk to the manager.
Okay. So we've got this whole crazy concept of data centers or similar type power from space. Now we have another company, which is called SPAN. And why don't you tell us, Dr. Eloise, a little bit about this idea around SPAN?
Well, you're a real estate mogul, and you will appreciate this. It's a way of creating passive income for yourself. So we will have a pitch right after this on how you can, no, I'm kidding.
You heard it first from us.
We're going to set up a multi-level marketing thing. No, what they want to do is put data centers in your garage and take advantage of excess electricity and internet bandwidth and basically distribute this. This is not new. So for those of you that remember Pigs in Space will certainly remember SETI, which was the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And back in the day when compute was just like we were using Intel 386 processors, which were really inefficient. Berkeley, UC Berkeley across the bay, they essentially did distributed computing on people's individual PCs. Laptops weren't really a thing back then. And when the screensaver would kick in, they would send data from telescope data, and it would process in the screensaver using your computer when you weren't using it. Fast forward, and that was just a volunteer project that did shut it down in 2020. I don't think they found any intelligence in the universe, or maybe the government's still keeping it confidential. We'll find out. However, of course, Bitcoin mining is the most recent incarnation of this, where you can, no offense to Neil, whatever, you could make Neil from Coinbase.
He's right in the front hiding.
You can, for many years, you could mine Bitcoins using your own servers and your own infrastructure, and it distributed that. You could get paid in Bitcoin, though I'm not sure what kind of currency that is. But certainly, like this ability to distribute, and now this company SPAN wants to put data centers in your garage, or at least some capacity, and basically do a distributed data center, which again, like SETI, actually takes advantage of when one part of the country is sleeping. There's power available, and it distributes the power load, versus just going into San Francisco and trying to draw a big electricity.
And I would say one aspect of this on the positive side is it's almost a three-sided win in some ways. You as the homeowner get compensated. The utility avoids new infrastructure costs, and the hyperscaler gets cheap, fast compute. So
Yep.
There's a lot of positives and things I think that we can really think about from this model. Now, putting my, CISO, CIO, CEO hat on, I think there's massive security concerns
You think?
that need to be really thought through. If you are Amazon and you are powering, massive amounts of data and information, and it's running off, out of Sarah Scudder's garage, right? So there's that whole thing that we need to think through, and I don't know what the answer is, and I think it will take maybe a major company to jump in and lead the charge, and then the rest of the folks got to catch up or figure out how to handle the security piece if they want to stay relevant and competitive.
Well, and there's also the liability piece, because what happens if the servers overheat and catch my house on fire? I'm going to sue somebody. Or vice versa, there's data loss, and it's because somebody came by my house and stole the copper out of it. So there's security and liability.
I do think it's something that we're going to start hearing about quite a bit. as it's a solution that could be implemented a lot quicker than some of these large data center builds.
But I will say the Bitcoin thing did work. So there is, and for a long time, there are a lot of videos on how to build your own Bitcoin farm at home. So I don't think it's, like, it sounds absurd when we're talking about it, but I'm not sure that it's totally dead either.
Yeah.
However, none of that matters. I don't think anything we've talked to up to this point matters. I think all of this is superfluous. I'm not buying the whole data center constraint thing, the cost, all of this.
So, Dr. Eloise, you are typically the contrarian on lots of different topics, and I know that you have a pretty unique perspective on where you think the future of data center is going. So let's dive into a little bit around how you think this is going to fare out for us as citizens and employees and businesses.
I think we've proven that we cannot keep up with the demand for data centers, and clearly putting it into space or into people's garages is not going to be the answer. And this is actually, my contrarian view is not really because I'm some genius. It's because I've been watching what some of the big tech companies are doing. And my belief is that most of these models are going to move out of the data center. They're going to move on-premise for enterprises, and for consumers, they're going to move into our devices, because we have these little mini supercomputers in our hands. I don't even know where my phone is, but you've got one there. And so in essence, edge computing, and we're going to put the models down into the devices themselves. And again, I've been wondering, after Apple made a colossal faceplant with Siri, they've really been quiet in all this, and I've been waiting and waiting and waiting to see what they do. And they just announced that they're going to have AI in the phones as edge cases, and they're going to start to see AI in the devices. Google just launched is going to this fall launch its new AI Gemini book, whatever.
Gamma 3.
Gamma 4 is the new release. Actually, since the time we were doing the notes, they released Gamma 4. So so you can put Gamma 4 on your phone, but there's also a version called Nano, I think, that is even slimmer. And so those of us that run into Claude constraints, imagine running a bunch of that stuff just on your computer. And I'm just absolutely fixated on this, because I believe that running the models locally is, with some in the data center. Because first of all, the data centers are too expensive. The cost, OpenAI and Oracle and all these other folks are
losing billions.
And we're not going to fix it by faster TPUs or more data centers. So ultimately, it's going to be distributed. I am really bullish on this, and so I'm kind of just rolling my eyes at some of the sort of data center fixes.
So, Dr. Eloise, we've got massive data center projects underway, some which were, supposed to be launched last year and are significantly delayed. If we really see this pivot to localized on-app type power, what happens to all the data centers?
I think they're going to sit idle, personally. And not only, as we talked, we have pressure from the communities. I think it's the state of New York is banning or putting a moratorium on new data centers. And the communities don't want them. And so why are we forcing them on us? And also, I'll just make one other sidebar. We have this whole data sovereignty issue. Okay, I'm going to get political, I think. Is that there's a big backlash in the EU to using American tech. And I can't imagine why they would be upset with us right now. But
no idea.
No idea. So they're moving away from Microsoft, moving away from Google, Azure, OpenAI. They're building their own LLMs. They're going to replace Office and their operating systems. And they're building their own data centers. And I don't think they can build them as fast. We've proven we can't. So the only way is to actually move this down into the device level. And the technology is getting better and better. And I will add, I actually forgot your question because I really wanted to dig at the political situation. But I will add, though, that the Chinese AI market is really advanced in the edge computing on your device models. And so Google really took a step forward by making a edge or sort of on your computer, on your phone model. And it's really a hedge against the Chinese market, the DeepSeeks and the others that are coming out of there. Because ultimately, if you're an enterprise, you're going to move your AI into your own infrastructure. So you're not going to be using these data centers.
Yeah, and there's a gentleman named Yann LeCun. He was the chief AI scientist at Meta, and he did a recent interview, and one of the reasons that he said the Chinese market is getting so far ahead of us is because they're open sourcing everything. Yeah. And we right now have a model in the US where a lot of things are closed down. Well, when you open source, you're sharing information with the masses, and you get people who are upgrading and contributing and working together collaboratively. And that's really started to set us back. Yeah. And it's really helped China kind of skyrocket ahead of what's going on here.
Well, and to go back to the GitHub thing, GitHub was we originated open source, or at least we as in Silicon Valley. Open source was so much back when it was hippies and peace and free love, which was the 60s, 70s, and 80s. When Silicon Valley was its own vibe, it's been taken over by, just say the crooks. But they've closed everything, and GitHub was this open source, and it was really this great representation of what open source can be. And then Microsoft bought it, and what did they do? They started charging money for it. Now they're going to charge exponentially more. So they killed the whole thing. And so, of course, OpenAI and Anthropic, and to some degree Google, they are these next versions. They're the commercial versions of what 20 years ago would have been open source. And I think it is closing us off to innovation.
Yeah. And I think this really, as we kind of wind down and jump into some Q&A, I think the question is there a world where edge AI and cloud AI can coexist together? Right? Instead of we're looking at maybe one extreme to the other, is there a world where we can use both to power the things that we need?
Well, I think it will have to, because you're never going to get like Nano Banana, Google's AI creation, and ChatGPT just came out with their image creation, and Veo 3, which is Google's video generator. You're not going to do that locally. But all this Claude stuff that I know you and I use to, write our whatever we're writing or thinking, that imminently will move to our phones, and we won't be using the cloud. And I think that's actually a good thing.
Yeah. So last question for you before we open it up to the audience. And I feel like I have a hard time even planning a month out right now. But if we look into the future, let's just throw out a number, 2035. What does the world look like for us in regards to data center and AI usage? What do you think?
Well, I think there won't be that many, or maybe there'll be that many. I think one thing that you're going to see, there's a tension, and because for national security, data centers are a national security asset and something that the federal government has and will continue to take a vested interest in, both for intelligence gathering, for watching where we all shop and what we do, and listening to all of our conversations, but also militarily. And I think that's where you'll see the data centers kind of move towards serving that market. And then, but for personal use and corporate use will go behind the firewall into these edge devices, or even our own, physical servers, whatever that looks like. And then for us as consumers, it will become more embedded. And, one of the edge use cases now is we're moving, like the phones are going away. Within 5 years, we really won't be using mobile phones. We'll be using wearables, and you're seeing not only Meta glasses, but if you Google like smart AI glasses, those are coming. There's like these AI necklaces, and we've got the watches. So we're going to start to move away from, I think there's not only are the old people wanting to move away from all the phones, but the younger generation does as well. So I think for our consumer lives, it's going to be around us, but it's not going to be looking down at our phones all day.
I think we're going to see a big pivot to the wearable market.
Yeah.
I think that is the big shift that we're going to see, and less phone, even less computer. It's going to be more part of our daily routine and our daily life, because it's going to be on us.
Yes.
Or in our homes in a way that is integrated in what we're doing on a day-to-day basis.
And hopefully less social media, and especially hopefully less SAP. I couldn't let that one go. I tried to upgrade my service panel at home in Oakland, and like PG&E, the local power company, wouldn't do it. Like, if I as a consumer can't get access to power, that tells you everything. Who cares about data if I can't power my house, much less my devices?
So the data center conference I was at the end of last year in San Antonio, it's put on by a group called 7 by 24. They are one of the largest associations in the world, nonprofit, for folks in the data center space. And kind of the theme of the conference, a lot of the sessions and the keynotes, was all around how power is the most important factor right now in data center decisions. More than anything else, figuring out where it's going to go based on the power is the number one consideration. There were some procurement folks at the audience, and they literally said, nobody cares about cost right now. Literally thrown out the window. What they care about is power, and people will pay anything for that.
Yeah. To me, AI is not going to automate the enterprise, it's going to expose it. So most of today's enterprises are poorly run, and people are the main sort of conduit of information and making decisions. And humans are terrible at both of those things. And so part of the promise of AI is if you build around an AI core, you get much more efficiency and effectiveness. And you still can have humans. There's lots of jobs for humans. So I'm not a big fan of AI, is going to fire everybody. However, none of that means that it's cheaper.
Yes.
And so it actually might cost you more. And by the way, you might also hire more humans, which is not what Wall Street wants to hear, but or our private equity overlords. So it's really about it's about the efficiency and effectiveness, because let's be honest, let's call it Fred is the procurement, the sourcing manager. He comes in around 8:45, 9, kind of gets his coffee, hangs out, gets on some Zoom calls and does like nothing, and then sends out an Excel RFP. Okay, great. And then he kind of supposed to leave at 4, and he edges out at 3:45 so he can go coach his son's baseball team. Great. I mean, I'm not upset at Fred, but also let's be honest, that's not a very efficient employee. So Fred might cost $100K all in each year, and that to replace Fred might cost $125K in tokens, but Fred can also work 24 hours a day. So, the AI can work 24 hours a day.
I think we're also going to see a major shift in the workforce, a split of people who have gone all in and embraced AI and people who have not. And I think you're going to see a massive challenge with some folks getting employment and staying relevant versus the folks that have gone all in and embraced an AI. I can already tell you in my company, I could tell you right now the 10 people that have gone all in on AI, and you can see an uptick in productivity and just the questions they ask and the way that they conduct themselves. So I think we're going to have a big shift in the workforce, like almost two buckets. You've got the AI all in, and then you've got the anti-AI. And I think the anti-AI people are really, really going to struggle.
Yeah. And I just want to say, like, the question that comes up, because I work with a lot of mega enterprise, big enterprises, and they're so slow to adopt this. And so the people under 40 ask me, what should I do? Because they roll out AI as or Copilot as their quote unquote AI strategy, which is silly.
Well, the board tells you to do it, Dr.
Yeah, I know.
So we launched Copilot,
yeah.
and we're AI. We're an AI company now.
Right. And so if you're under 40, you can't stay at that company because, well, actually, if you're over 40, you can't stay either because you have to get into the groove where you're in that other bucket. If you're over 40, especially over 50, and you lose your job in a layoff, you're not competitive anymore. And if you're under 40, you're going up against the people that are working at UNHCR that are in that super bucket. So this is going to be, the market is going to figure this out for the individuals, not the top-down corporate. Every time first off, if you want to learn about AI, please stay off of LinkedIn. Everything out there is just trash. And but also just understanding that you really have to embrace this because this is your career.
So while she was saying that, she said, stay off LinkedIn for AI. I'm just going to plug, no endorsement at all, I promise. I get overwhelmed with, I feel like every hour there's a new AI announcement, and then I think I'm behind every night I go to bed. I'm stressed out because I have to get up tomorrow and relearn everything that I need to know about AI. There's an excellent podcast called The Artificial Intelligence Show with Paul Reutzier. They have an episode that comes out on Tuesdays. It's about an hour and a half. And it is my go-to to listen to so I know and am current on everything that happened in AI the last week. So it's something that I listen to religiously. I get a lot of information. They actually have had some really good topics around the data center space as well. Some of the stuff that we've talked about today has actually come from their show. But if you are like me and you're freaking out and overwhelmed about all the changes in AI, highly recommend checking out their podcast as kind of a weekly, stay relevant, know what's top of mind, and know what's happening.
I'll just give you insight into how I do it. So I watch a lot of YouTube, just tons and tons of YouTube, and the amount of there's an amazing amount to learn. So I actually take I take the YouTube URL and have Claude summarize it, and then it goes into Obsidian. And so I get the summary so I can quickly distill what the announcement is, because it'll be like a 10-minute video for about 10 seconds worth of content. But then I put the transcript into Obsidian, so the Obsidian uses kind of my second brain to sort of pull out that knowledge, so that Obsidian knows what I'm consuming on LinkedIn, or YouTube, not LinkedIn, nothing on LinkedIn.
So I was in Vegas last week at the Service and Support World Conference. So think service and support desk ticketing systems like a ServiceNow or a Jira, Atlassian. And one of the things that some companies talked about that they're testing is outcome-based pricing for ticketing. So you do 1,000 tickets a month. If an AI agent can solve 40% of that, we're going to pivot that model. Then the question becomes, what is a successful closure? And how do you rank the outcome of that closed ticket done by an agent versus a human? But that was an interesting conversation at the conference last week. And there were definitely some companies that are talking about how they're testing it based on closing tickets without the employee ever having to go speak with a human at the support desk.
Yeah. All right, we're going to close it out here. I just wanted to say, I think my main takeaway, even just in talking and listening to Sarah and some of these questions, is the way procurement negotiates IT is fundamentally changing. Because not only do you have data centers, but electricity. Again, if we're just going to move offices over there, like the electricity cost and some of these sort of the components of what we're paying for vis-a-vis tech it's brand new, and I think it's actually very exciting.
And I think tracking and managing devices, and I'm not saying this just because I happen to work in the IT asset management space, is going to be more and more important, especially if we're going to have power and energy hosted locally on our devices.
I think that's a wrap.